That is the benefit.
There you go. I didn't open a bottle yet. I just have iced tea so far.
No, this is not my first drink.
Yeah, right. There you go. It's so good to see your faces. I miss coming up.
You guys, I know.
Hey, this thing's telling me we're live.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, okay.
Oh, good.
Yeah, well, it is
Okay.
7 o'clock, so I'm going to assume we are. And as usual, I'm going to go find this and verify that this is the case, because I can't start a story night just clean. So I'm clicking on, well, anyway, maybe somebody else can do this. I don't care. Let's not mess with it. Let's just assume let's just assume we're live. If somebody else can confirm it, great. But I can't see the page.
Yes, you're live, Steve.
Okay. So if one of you can monitor, like if you see questions coming, let us know. And unless I can figure out, probably during when I have my friends from the library. Hi, everybody. It's not just my friends from the library here or my friends who are going to tell stories tonight and just me. We have presumably an audience, and we're going to get started. And at some point, I'm going to be able to see comments, but I just haven't figured it out yet. This is my way. I don't worry about it until it's the night of. So thank you for joining us tonight for Story Night. I know I kind of raised expectations that you're going to get some wild story. It may not come from me. It may come from one of our other storytellers. So be prepared for that. We are in, what is this, month 6 of the virtual Story Night thing. And it wouldn't surprise me if we're in for another, I'll just say few. I don't want to be too big of a pessimist, but things we're gonna hold this place until we can get back together. So there'll be a place to tell stories once a month. Usually the first Thursday of the month. We're moving some dates in November and December, I believe. And because I don't know if you're aware of this, if you don't read the news, you don't know, but we're having an election in 2 months. We are primed to, and since I work in elections, I'm primed to be busy around that time. And the last couple of times that I've done a story night around a general election, it has been exhausting to the core. And I don't want to be exhausted when I do it next time. And I might be feeling angry. So I don't want to do it for that reason either.
Is there a way you don't end up angry in this?
I think that there's a good likelihood everyone will be.
Half of America is going to be, well, the half that vote. There's probably a few that don't vote that they'll say, oh, what the heck? What was I thinking? Or, well, see why I don't vote or something like that, some other thing. But since I work in elections, it is a general election is especially in an even number year, it's always going to be busy and it's tiring. And I remember how exhausted I was in 2016 because it is kind of a nonstop sprint for us. And so we're going to push it back a couple of weeks that time. Next month, I just gave Jose our themes for the next few months. Next month, it's cars. In November, it's thank you. Even though it'll be after the election, you're going to give us reason that you're thankful. In December, it's going to be 2020 vision. And I think I'm already out into next year, but I think 2021, the first week, the theme is going to be now what? Because we'll have experienced 2020 by then. And we'll know the whole story. This sleeper of a year that came in with so much promise because the numbers are so alliterative. I don't know if that's the right term, but anyway, 2020. It's so it's a poetic. It's just a beautiful phrase, and it has turned out to be such a fun year. So we're going to have a lot to say about it in the first month of 2021, and maybe the last month of 2020. I don't know. In February of 2020, I couldn't have predicted that March would be our last live one for the longest time. So Tonight, as usual, we are joined by our Jose and Priya from the Kitsap Regional Library. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the floor over to them. I know I've promised a story of my own tonight. You got to wait for it. And the other stories are going to be better anyway, so you're going to be fine with that. But anyway, I want to turn the time over to Jose and Priya. They're going to talk to us about some library programs. Take it away. Should I make it speak? Should I make it?
Yeah, spotlight.
Yeah, spotlight. Well, who will I spotlight on?
Jose first.
Okay, yes, I will go first then. So I will share my screen really quick. Yay, now can everybody see my screen?
I can.
Well, yeah. So here's the library webpage. Please, when you have a chance, take a look. You will have the locations, contact, how to support my account. But what I want to show is when you go to classes and event, you click over Inspire Light. We are not doing the Inspired like the magazine that we used to have. So we are having this digital format about Inspire Light. On the first page, you will see Story Night as showcase as one of the outreach and programs that we're doing. And other more activities and about book conversations and book groups that is happening all around. And also we have a book club pick, which is a book that is on Overdrive, which is unlimited. And I mean, it has unlimited downloads. And the way to get that book is like going into the library web career page. Let me go back really quick. You go over read, watch, and listen. I mean, on the downloads tab. Oh my God, Steve. So audio and ebooks. Then once you are here, you will see the book, but you will need to get your library card. So click on sign in. And once you're there, you enter your credentials and you will have it here. And once you have it ready, click over the book and click barrel again. And you can either select, if you have a Kindle, you can download it directly to the Kindle, or you can read it on your browser or download as an EPUB format. I will open in my browser because I want to read books on my browser. And there you have it. So it's a book that is on unlimited downloads, so you don't have to be doing the line and all that. So please feel free to reach me with any questions. And yeah, I think that Priya wants to now say something. So yeah. Good to see you all, my friends, and wish you all have a happy good night.
Thanks, Jose. So I just got a couple updates to share. First off, we are open for curbside service still. So if you have been reading your ebooks like Jose just showed, and you're just really hankering for some paper and ink, you can put things on hold on your account. And then when they're ready for you to pick up, you will get notification through your account, either by phone or text or email that says, hey, this is ready to come pick up. Please make an appointment. And then you can make a 10-minute appointment at any time during our open hours between 10 and 4 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 10 and 1 p.m. Saturdays at the smaller branches. I believe it's 10 to 4 at the larger branches as well. So you can still get your print books. And if you stop by downtown, you might be able to say hi to me, or at Sylvan, say hi to Jose. And then lastly, we have a new service that we just launched like 2 days ago called Book Bundles. So if you're really missing browsing our stacks, or just walking into your favorite section of the library and just closing your eyes and pulling a couple things off the shelf, you want that sort of like random happenstance experience that would come from browsing in person, Book Bundles is the best thing we can offer right now. So there's a quick form online. It's krl.org/bundles. And you can give us a little bit of details about what you feel like reading, and we will provide 3 to 10 items on that topic. It can be anything from picture books for your little ones to new sci-fi picks because you really need some escapism, to the best hiking guides we have. And one of our library staff will create a little bundle for you and have it ready to pick up, just like any item that you would put on hold. So that is on our website now, krl.org/bundles. Hopefully that can be the second best thing to browsing in person. And if you have any questions, you know how to get in touch with us. Thanks.
Well, thanks, Jose and Priya. And by the way, I can see the comments. And Sherry Lynn said she picked up her shirt and tote bag last week. Thank you, Kitsap Regional Library, she says. Looks like Janae has quite the fan club here. So everybody's saying hi to Janae. I have it in gallery view right now. So just to let you know who's going to be telling stories tonight, we're going to hear first from Nessa Goldman. She's sitting with Janae Sparks. You know they're not the same people because whenever you see one, you see the other one. They're always in the same place at the same time. And we're going to hear from Lorinda Esposito all the way. By the way, people are coming. When I say they're coming from a distance, Janae and Nessa are up in Squim. I always am tempted to say Port Angeles, but it's Squim, not quite Port Angeles. Lorinda's out near Ocean Shores, or is it officially Ocean Shores?
Yeah, I'm in Ocean Shores. Yeah.
Okay. And Doug's here local, so he and I are boring. I think Jose and Priya are too, but Priya's in some new digs.
Still in Bremerton.
Still in Bremerton.
It's
Yeah.
about 5 minutes away.
Yeah. Well, the song says to move there, and it looks like you have. So that's a good thing. Do you know that song, by the way? Move to Bremerton?
I don't think so.
Okay, so that's your homework. It's MXPX. Go find that song. Move to Bremerton. It's a full-on happy song. Okay, so we have had a volunteer to go first tonight. So please welcome Nessa Goldman. And I'm gonna spotlight you. There you go.
I'm on. Okay. So when my best friend told me that she thought she was going to marry Michael, I didn't say anything, which is an answer in and of itself. And then she was like, "What are you thinking?" And I was like, "Well, I think you're going to marry him, and I think you'll have kids, and I think you'll get divorced." I'm her best friend. I told her the truth. She didn't like my answer. She's also watching right now, and I've never told this story back to her. So here we go. And I didn't say anything because that's what a best friend does, right? You say your piece, they tell you they reject what you've said, and you bite your tongue and you walk down the aisle with them when they get married, and you are their maid of honor. But when that day came that they were getting married, we were getting our hair done, and we're sitting in this big room. It's a big Jewish wedding. There's a huge bridal party. And I remember there's this light in the sky. It was that when it's really dark, but the sun's just coming up and everything's kind of that golden hue. And I was like, "Ooh, I love that light. It's a little ominous." She's like, "Why would you say that?" She was in Bridezilla mode too. She's like, "Why would you say that?" I'm like, it's kind of what it is. I'm like, it could be a good thing. It's just the sign. And we go throughout the day, and we have, like I said, the big bridal party, the corset dress. And I am getting her in and out of that dress in between photo shoots and so on. But as we go throughout the day, she's feeling not good physically. And I'm like, "What do you need? I'm here for you, best friend. You need water, you need I can't think of it, champagne." And I'm getting her whatever she needs. And she's like, I need to get out of the dress. So we undo that corset dress. We're getting her in and out. And we go and we do the big photo shoot. We're all smiling. We're holding our arms this way and that way, and we're doing the posing. And then as soon as we get back in the bridal suite, we're ripping her out. And as the day goes on, it's everybody's like, "It's nerves. You're just nervous. Have some tonic water. Have this. Everybody's got an antidote." She's got one friend who's offering her cocaine, telling her she's gonna feel better if she just does some cocaine. And I'm like, "No, I've got you." And it came down to we had the ceremony. She did the daddy-daughter dance. And we got her back out of that dress, and we could not get her back in after. She was in agony. I'm peeling her out of her Spanx, and she's lying over the toilet. And I'm like, "This is a Jewish wedding, and there's got to be a doctor in here somewhere at this point." So we send out the call, and sure enough, there's a doctor, and she rushes into the suite, and she examines my best friend. And Carolyn's she's like, "It's appendicitis." I know it. It's appendicitis. And the doctor examines her. She's like, "I don't know what it is, but you've got to get out of here." And so we, strip her out of the dress. We get her back into her pajamas, which is what she came in. We all put on our pajamas in solidarity. And she's like, is everybody having a good time? And I'm like, everybody's having a great time. The spread's amazing. The band's spectacular. I'm glad your priorities in order. And she tells me then that she wants me to give her speech. And I'm like, that seems kind of inappropriate. She's like, just give the speech. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. So as she's getting wheeled off in an ambulance to go to the hospital, I stand up in my pajamas and I give her speech, which ironically is to a man named Michael. And I've been dating a guy named Michael at the time. And my dad is like kvelling. He's like, this is the best thing I could have ever imagined. My daughter talking about her loving husband, Michael. But Carolyn and Michael aren't even there anymore. And we end up going to the ER after the ceremony. It was really kind of anticlimactic after that point. This is the hump. But we go and we're sitting in the hospital room, and I remember being in there when the morphine drip kicked in, and she was like from agony to just like feeling relief. And we find out a couple days later that yes, it was appendicitis, and she has to have her appendix removed. But Michael, she kept for about 5 years until I was right. I put on the good face. I was the good best friend. I've been with her through all the years, and we're on the other side now. So that separation was about a year ago, and I think I upheld my end as her best friend and putting on the face and the front that I needed to do, and I don't think she would fault me for it. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Oh.
Thank you. So you mentioned she's watching tonight. She's never heard this story.
And she said, sing it on the feed there.
Oh, so it's Carolyn. Okay. Oh yeah. Well, yeah, that'll be someone else singing. Well, Carolyn, thanks for joining us. Glad you survived. That's not a wedding story that I've heard very often. So you have a story to tell for the rest of your life. And Nessa's getting good mileage out of it, so you might want to take your turn. Anybody have any questions for Nessa?
I just have to say that is a good friend right there. Well done.
Yep.
I was the good friend, even though here I am.
Yes. No, because you told her what you needed to, and then you did what you needed to. And some people can't do it. They can't do.
Friendship. She's like, we're real with each other, and
Yeah.
And she told me too, like really, like she's like, this is not what I need to hear, and I'm like, got you. I told you, but we're done now.
Yep.
I'll keep it quiet till I tell it on a story podcast.
So Carolyn has chimed in here that she misses her appendix, but not Michael. Carolyn, if you could come down to Bremerton sometime and see, I'm not saying move to Bremerton, but if you could come down to Bremerton sometime, we'll have to get Alicia Morales up on stage to talk about a guy she knew named Mike. We have infamous stories about people named Mike, and now we'll add Michael. My brother's name is Michael, so, but I know it wasn't that guy you were married to.
My husband, so
Yeah.
we're all with Mike's.
Yes.
He's probably
Well, no, yeah. Well, give me some time. Anyway, let's see. Oh, I had you on Spotlight video. I got to cancel that. We're not doing the, we need gallery view here. And so there we go. Okay. So thank you, Nessa, for kicking us off. As I didn't mention, I didn't talk about it because there may be some people here who've never watched a storytelling event before like this. You could go to the Moth, or you could go to the Out Loud Story Slam up in Sequim in Port Angeles and see much the same thing. People get 5 minutes. They tell a true story. It's autobiographical, no prop, no notes. Since we're going virtual, we're not really adhering to the theme, or we're not punishing anybody. And you should see our punishments. They, people know better. Yeah. People that break the rules get in real trouble. At any rate, like I say, because we're virtual, it is almost more important that we just gather and meet. So we're not throwing up timers. We're not throwing up cues that say, hey, look, you got 5 minutes. As I like to say, we love your story. We're sure there's an ending. Please find it. We're not doing that virtually. So hopefully we don't go too long, and hopefully I don't talk so long that we run out of things. And I'm talking about in between stories. So, Lorinda, are you cool going next?
Sure.
Because
Sure.
I'm not sure Doug's done eating. So
Okay.
we're going to, if you can, I'd like you to go for next, if you would. Folks, all the way from Ocean Shores, Washington, please welcome Lorinda Esposito.
Thank you. And I was able to unplug my phone so that I'm getting a slightly better angle on the double chin, but it's still there. There's nothing I can do about that.
Well, and I just put
and
you own the whole screen now too. So
Okay.
yeah.
I do also want to explain this behind me. Yes, these are saw blades. That is the headboard of my bed. And yes, we're smiley middle-aged people. So, hi. All right, to my story. So, when I was in college, I was a theater major, many of you know, at Oregon State University. And one of the shows that my best friend and acting buddy and I auditioned for together was Midsummer Night's Dream. I was Helena, she was Hermia. We were adorable, it's very cute. She's now married to Demetrius and they're very happy. But one of the other shows we did together had a bit different flavor, and that was Oedipus Rex by Sophocles. Probably a few of you have seen it. You all know about the Oedipus complex. In a nutshell, it's not a happy play. So my friend Kim and I and one other gal, who I think's name was Melissa, were the Greek chorus. If you're not familiar with Greek tragedy, the Greek chorus was one role played by many people. And the way that this particular director chose to do that was he cast the three of us. Melissa was, I believe, just under 6 feet tall. I was about 5'9" at the time and much more slender. There was only one chin back then. And then Kim was about maybe 5'2" and a smidge. And so there were the three of us. And then the interesting concept that he brought to our roles dealt with masks. So he brought in a mask maker. So of course, this is educational theater. We're all learning how to make the masks and all the different materials that are used and all that. Really interesting process. So he made these really grotesque masks, which were then mounted to a pole. And each of us held the pole and held the mask in front of our face. But then our makeup was applied in a similar fashion to the mask. So we were grotesque as well. And our costumes were made of really bad polyester double knit. Remember that bad suit your dad had? It was that really bad polyester double knit that had then been over dyed and dipped and dyed a number of ways so that it added great depth and texture. And we were also stained after every performance all over our bodies because the black dye would come off. Anyway, there was a lot of interesting texture to it. And so the way that it worked on stage was the three of us would come out holding our poles with our masks over our faces. And then as we spoke, there was a whole choreographed dance, so to speak, that we did. It was not a beautiful dance, it was creepy. And suddenly we went from 3 to 6, and then we'd go to 4 and all the different numbers. So we used these masks to give an otherworldly feeling to the characters that we played. It was one of the most interesting concept shows I ever got to do. So that's where the masks come in. But the story that I want to tell you briefly is about one of the things that I learned from working with this particular director. I've told one story about him before. Some of you might have heard. He was my second favorite professor. His name was Mr. Bennett. We all called him Ben. And during the rehearsal process, he gave lots of notes to the other two gals. And right at first, he gave me some direction. But so, you know, as we're blocking and what have you, he'd tell me what to do. But then by notes, what I mean is afterwards, we would sit down and he would tell us, you know, what was working, what was not, and what he wanted changed, right? He never told me anything. He would just totally ignore me and he'd focus on the other two gals. And being an insecure acting student, I just assumed that he hated me and he figured I wasn't worth wasting any time on because I was so bad. There was not a thing that could be done. And so I set up an appointment to go see him because I had just worked myself into, you know, this paranoid tizzy of he just hates me. He's going to recast me as soon as possible. Anyhow, I went into his office and I said, you know, hey, Ben. And he said, well, what's up, Lorinda? What can I do for you? And I told him what I thought. I said, you know, you never say anything to me. And I'm assuming it's just because you can't stand what I'm doing. And, you know, so tell me, what do you want from me? What would you like? And he said, oh, no, you're just fine. I just never felt the need to say anything because I really like what you're doing. These other two gals are driving me nuts. And I was so totally surprised. And I learned a lot from that moment that I've applied to my life in many ways. Don't assume that somebody's view of you is bad is one of the first things I learned. I'm trying not to be preachy, but sorry, you know, pandemic, I'm going to be a little preachy. You know, don't assume that somebody's opinion of you is bad, because that's, some of us, that's the first place we go, right? That insecurity. And then secondly, as a director later, I learned, boy, don't ever ignore somebody, never leave someone out. Give them some good word, you know, tell them to hold their left pinky finger differently, just to contact them and to make them included. And also, once I realized what his view was, I thought, these other poor girls, because I thought they were doing a great job. I really did. And they, you know, the three of us together were, I think, eventually a really good ensemble. But boy, if you really don't like them that much, bring them into your office and help them there instead of beating them up in front of the crowd. So those are some things that I learned as a director that I applied in many different ways over the years to help, you know, other insecure actors and actresses. And I prefer to be called an actress. I'm old. It's a feminine word that I really like. You can call yourself an actor if you're a lady, I don't mind, or a woman, sorry, I do that wrong too. But my point is that even though it was an awkward time for me, and really probably one of the hardest shows I ever did, it's so dark. If you haven't ever seen it, just don't. It's sad and awful. And, you know, Oedipus ends up poking his own eyes out and he dies and everything's terrible. It's all really, really sad and miserable and you're just all wrong. So anyway, it was a difficult role to play, but such a stretch as an actress, and really, really fun to work with masks. So I'm glad I did it, even though it was really dark and miserable. So that's my story.
Thank you, Lorinda. Thanks for sharing that. Amy Kent is here from, she's visiting here at Story Night from St. Louis, and she said her last name used to be Macbeth. And lots of the family, lots of us involved in the community theater, but no one wanted to call them by name. And
right.
Yeah, no, so that's, wait, is that the name that you don't say? You never say?
Yes, that
Okay,
inside a
okay.
theater, you're just supposed to say the Scottish play.
That's right, okay.
Yeah, because you can call the character Macbeth by name or Lady Macbeth by name, but you don't say the name of the play.
Well, fun tradition. Yeah. Well, thanks for your story. Thanks, Amy, for sharing that. Amy, if you're cool with this, I'm gonna, when I tell my story later, I'm gonna if you're willing, I'll call you out by name because you have a role in this stuff. And I'm gonna leave a lot of names out of it, but because I don't have permission for a lot. But now that I know you're here, if you're still listening, give me a nod whether that's going to be okay to call you out. Otherwise, people are going to wonder, well, why was he asking Amy Kent for permission to say her name? But then she said no, and wonder where she fits into this story. So I've kind of put you on the spot. I'm sorry. Thank you, Lorinda, for your story. We have one more before we go back to our friends from the library, and then I'll wrap up the night. At any rate, we have Doug with us. Doug is here from Port Orchard. I say that's boring, but I know that he wasn't in Port Orchard a few weeks ago. You went back to Connecticut, I believe. And
yes.
I don't know if does tonight's story touch on that at all? It doesn't have to.
It only kind of. I actually just had a sentiment I wanted to share with everybody before I told my story because of my trip. So if that's okay. I have a little side kind of note, I guess. So I did drive to Connecticut. I drove there the whole way, solo trip, and I was in Montana and listening to local radio, and a storm warning came on, and I know nothing about the area. And it was a pretty severe storm warning. They were talking about 60-mile-an-hour winds, damaging hail, things, this kind of thing. So I pulled over to get out of the storm and ride it out. A couple hours later, it never really hit. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get back on the road. And I was in the storm for about 20 seconds. Turned out the storm was actually behind me. If I had just kept going, I would have outran the storm. But here's the thing. Because I pulled over, I ended up at a rest area in Montana. And there was this really, really awesome older gentleman running the rest area who just regaled me for 2.5 hours about his life and how he lived in Montana, but taught in Washington State for 30 years. And it actually ended up being a really good experience just because I pulled over for a storm I was probably going to outrun anyway.
That's great.
There were no accents. Well, Doug, if you're ready, you can launch into your story.
Yeah. All right. So I've always considered myself a bit of a social chameleon. And it's partly because, growing up, I never really fit in a lot of places. I was bullied a lot. And I always just felt like I had to follow the crowd. I had to, dress like other people were dressing, talk like other people were talking, just to avoid that kind of behavior. And it's something that's never left me. Like it's just what I do even in my adult life. But I remember one particular Halloween actually, and I had this troll doll, the classic trolls, and it was a Halloween troll, and its face was painted like a pumpkin, and it had purple hair, and it was dressed like a vampire, and it had a cape and everything, and I was supposed to be going to a costume contest at the school, which I always dreaded. I never wanted to go to these things. I never won. I always felt like they were a popularity contest over anything. So I decided for my costume that I was going to dress up exactly like the troll. And I did. I had the purple hair. I had the cape. I painted my face to look like a pumpkin. I did the whole shebang. And I walked around trick-or-treating dressed like this troll with this troll on my shoulder. If I could digress a little bit, because this is ultimately a story about how I learned at a young age how we're all wearing masks. I had this classmate of mine who was always at school, always bubbly, always smiling, always just bright, having a good time. And I remember we drove right by her bus stop on Halloween. Right by her bus stop, and she never got on the bus. And I saw an ambulance there and stuff. And I'm in second grade, so I'm kind of worried, but I don't know everything that's going on. Anyway, flash forward to the costume contest. I'm expecting to see my whole class there, and I'm dreading kind of like showing off my costume, and because I think I think I'm in for what I'm always in for. I'm going to get made fun of. I'm going to get this. I'm going to get that. Well, I paraded around the gym, Ended up winning the costume contest. Received my first ever silver dollar, which as a second grader, let me tell you, that was, I just won the lottery right there. That was, I was like, look at this big fat coin. This is awesome. So I was pretty excited to have actually won the costume contest, and my classmates were coming up to me and they were looking at my troll, they were looking at me, and they were all in awe, like how well the costume was. Like they were surprised that, you know, how well it was presented and stuff. I think really they just wanted to see my giant fat coin. But it was a pretty good night. Went to school the next day. The high from Halloween was kind of running out already. I wasn't in my costume anymore. There was no glamour for me. The kids saw me for who I really was, and it was right back to, plain old Doug. But the weird thing that happened was the classmate of mine, whose house my bus had driven by, she wasn't in school that day. And I thought back and I was like, I didn't even see her at the Halloween party. And still didn't think anything of it until a couple days later, the principal pulled a few of us kids off to the side, who were in her classroom and more importantly on her bus route, because they knew what we had all saw a few days prior. And they told us that what they had said at the time was that she was in a bad accident at home, and because of it, she would no longer be coming back to the school, and that she was okay. And it wasn't until a few years later, when I really started growing up, we kind of knew then too, but it wasn't until a few years later when I really started growing up and learning the ins and outs of, other people's home lives and stuff, that it really hit what had happened to her. And we never would have guessed, because she was so happy and so bubbly every time she went to school. So it was just kind of a Halloween that I'll always remember, because I remember feeling ecstatic that I was able to finally get out of my own shadow and, not having to hide behind my fake mask to please other people, to being so young and realizing that other people, no matter how happy they seem, are also hiding behind a mask. So it was a really interesting experience for me at such a young age.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Doug.
Yeah.
Thank you for let's applause for Doug. Thank you for sharing that story. And I do want to say, I want to talk to you. I don't know how much you want to talk about your trip back to Connecticut, this most recent one. Maybe you're still processing all the stories. I actually had a story that kind of relates to what you just did, but I didn't want to tell you because it's kind of like, well, let Doug have his own experience, and then so we could swap stories later about that. But thank you as always for joining and sharing your stories. They're always good. Anybody else have anything to add? I need to take the spot. No, the spotlight is off, isn't it? Let's go.
Yeah, it's off.
Gallery view. Anybody else have any questions? Anything to add before we go to the next part?
I
Okay.
had also a purple troll that was my favorite back in the day. Just have to say, purple haired troll. Yep.
Yeah, congrats on the contest, by the way. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so I am going to put the spotlight on me for a little bit. Before I get into the story, I want to draw attention to a couple of things. Actually, let's do before I tell my story. I'll do this one thing. I want to show this book. It's called Storyworthy. It's written by a guy named Matthew Dix. If you ever look at a theme, a moth theme, or a story night theme, or an out loud story slam theme. I can't remember theme when it comes to the out loud folks. I'm sorry, my apologies. But if you ever are stumped for a theme and you want to either get up and tell a story, you want to support the event, whatever, this has helped me a lot. I was looking at, there was a moth theme last month. They're doing virtual as well. And the theme was enthusiasm. And I'm like, well, I got a lot of things, that I've been excited about, but I don't know if anything that merits a story. And I did one of the exercises in this book. And the first night I did it, I had a story that would work. I never went and told the story. It was just nice to know that I could. That was one of the things I was testing, because I want to watch one of their virtual events before I throw my hat in the ring again. That's all for that. Oh, by the way, the author is Matthew Dix. He has won Moth Story Slams and Grand Slams multiple times. His stories are great. So I just want to share that. Actually, and before I tell my story, I want to go back to Jose and Priya one more time to talk about library programs. They've mentioned this before, but I want to give them another opportunity, because a lot of you weren't here at the beginning, and I want Kitsap Regional Library to get their due. We wouldn't be where we are if it wasn't for them. So are we going to start with Jose again?
Yes.
You want to do that? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm going to put the spotlight on you.
All right.
And I'll take it off when you're done.
I just want to follow up on Priya's what she mentioned about the curbside service, and I will share my screen again so everybody can see how can you can do the the book bundles. That's what Priya shared about. So if you go to KRL.org, sometimes I skip letters as well. And it will be highlighted here in this black and teal field that you see there, like picture, and click over there and you will find this form that you can fill and add your library card number, the library location where you're thinking to pick up your holds, I mean the bundles. And if you can share with us a little more information so we can locate, and it's easier to us to find more books for you. You can select the age, and if it's for a teen or an adult, and if you have like more than one range, describe that on the box below the form. If you prefer fiction, non-fiction, or both, and then the type of book that you want. And if you want to give us more details about like your specific request, there's a field for that. And then after that, submit the form. I want to say that we have lots of them at the moment, but not all the branches maybe have them at the same time. But do the request. So we're taking them as they come. And if we need to contact you, we will contact you back to the information that you have on your record. So it's very important that you provide like the same information so we can have contact you back. So that'd be all from my part. I don't know if Priya wants to say something about specific downtown Bremerton programs or.
Yeah, I will share very briefly. Thank you for explaining the book bundles process, Jose. To throw it back to the little preview we got for Inspire Light. If you're picking up materials from the library, you might find that little pamphlet tucked in one of your books or in your bag. It does list out our programs. You will notice there are significantly less nowadays because we're virtual. I did want to highlight one program that I think some of you might have attended so far. It's a newer program we started this summer called the Anti-Racism Learning Circle. We meet on the 2nd and 4th Thursdays of the month at 5 o'clock. Virtually over Zoom. You can find the information on the website. Basically, there are a few recommended resources. You don't have to engage them if you don't want to. We have a different topic every week, and basically it's just a place to come and talk about something related to anti-racism, to ask questions you've wanted to ask, to talk to your neighbors. We focus in a large group, and then we split into small groups if there's a large group attending that evening. And it's just like a really engaging and open-minded and compassionate space for you to engage with ideas that maybe you haven't talked about before, or maybe ideas you want to talk to your family and friends about. So I would encourage you all to attend if you're interested. The next session should be on September 10th, and all that information is available on our website, krl.org. If you have any questions, you know where to find us. Thanks.
Once again, thank you, Jose and Priya, for your support, for your work at the library, most of all, and for your support of Story Night. I've said it a million times, this event wouldn't have been going on as long as it has were it not for your support. And I will never forget that as long as this thing goes. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, I thought you
Yeah.
were going to add something. All right. So I kind of built up expectations earlier in the day about a story. I had a moment yesterday that where there was a reveal in my family that was, you know, pretty a long time coming. I'll say that. So I'm going to start by a time when I was 8 years old. It was 1970, and our phone rang in our house, and phones were attached to the wall at times. And I walked over. Me being the youngest, I was most often tasked with doing things that involved getting up out of a chair and going to the wall or some other part of the house to get things. And I went and answered the phone, and I heard a woman ask for my mother. And I knew in my heart what was happening. And it was my grandmother had been in the hospital. She had been thought to be getting better, but something told me that this was not going to be a happy news phone call. And my only question was how upset my mother would be. It was her mother. And because that had been a really kind of a tortured relationship. And the news was bad. My grandmother had died. She was in her 70s. And my mom broke down and sobbed. And part of me was a little surprised. And it wasn't that I doubted that my mom loved her mother, but they had, like I said, they had had a tough relationship. So the story my mom always knew was, she learned, she come to know, she knew who her mom and dad were. Leota, naming names. I said I wasn't going to do that. Leota was her mother, though, and I wrote about this in the Kitsap. I wrote about this in the Kitsap Sun in 2007. I put a link to the story on one of the posts earlier today, and I'll if I need to, I'll post it again. But she had written a story about what she imagined her birth was like, and it was in a room where it was in a house, and there was a tense situation because the story was that my grandfather had impregnated a 16-year-old girl. And this girl was now giving birth in the home of my grandfather and grandmother, the woman I would know as my grandmother, and that she would give birth and walk away forever from my mom's life. That was the story. Obviously, part of the reason it's so difficult is because that's a sad event for any family to have an affair at all, and for there to be a child involved. My grandmother was unable to have children, and she agreed to raise this girl, my mother. And my grandfather and she stayed married for a while, but my grandmother I'm cognizant. I've had other family members, not that side of the family, but then on the other side, express disbelief at speaking ill of people who are dead. But I can't tell. There are some people in history that we don't talk well of. We don't talk about how well they were to their dogs, so to speak. So my grandmother did have her good qualities, but she was a difficult woman. She was demanding. She believed, she operated in a way that she put demands on people that were unreasonable all the time. She gambled my mom's money. And the way I remember the story is that my mom would come home from school. My mom was working from the time she was 13. She started a movie theater, working there, and my grandmother would come home and say, listen, I bet $20 for you at the track and you lost, and so you owe me $20. She had pushed her as a child to, a lot of parents did this, but I have no doubt that the pressure that she had put on my mom was severe. She pressured her to, she had enrolled her in acting schools because there were a lot of parents during the Depression that were wanting their little girls to become the next Shirley Temple. And my grandmother was no exception on that. And the pressure was severe. My mom did love to learn orchestra and things like that. The marriage between my grandmother and grandfather ended, I think, sometime around 8, 9, 10 years old. My mom worshiped her dad. And when he was leaving, she went to him and asked if she could go with him. And of course, he said no. This was the 30s. And, whether despite the fact that he was the biological father and that the woman back home was not, that didn't change anything. So that didn't change the situation. So he left. He's actually an interesting man. He served in World War I and World War II. We'll get to the World War II stuff in a bit. But he had some great qualities, but he also had a reputation for being a womanizer and being I've been operating under the assumption that I have relatives all over the country that I have no idea where and who they are. And so my mom lived with her mother. This was her second marriage. She would end up with 4, which was a little scandalous back in those days, 4 marriages. She drove all of her husbands crazy, except the last one, and he died. So that's how he got out of that marriage. She had a series of boyfriends and people that she called tenants, and one of them abused my mother, and her mother did not believe her. And so this was the situation she grew up in. And when she was in high school, she was working in the cafeteria, and my dad would come through the line. He noticed her. He took a shine to her. He was a couple years older. She had her eyes on a baseball player. I don't know why that didn't happen, but my understanding is she chose my dad over the baseball player. I could be wrong about that. And I know she loved my dad, but one of the things she said later in life was that she got married a week after high school. She was not even 18 yet, and she did it to get out of the house. And she had 2 boys within a couple of years. So I think she was probably 20 when she, and I should be doing math or something. No, she was 21 when she had my the second boy. And then 8 years later, she had me. And we would get visited by this grandmother, and it was awful. It was you could not let her come because she was, mom, she was grandma. But it was rough. She would make demands on, and I think my brothers had it worse than I did, but she would make lots of demands on them to do things that were gross. The worst, I just remember she didn't lock the bathroom door, and no kid wants to see that. And so it's one of the things I remember, but she would get in arguments about UFOs and Kennedy, the Kennedy assassination. She was absolutely convinced in all of the worst conspiracies. They were kind of harmless at the time, but it was rough, and it had taken a toll on my mom all that time. At one point she wanted to know the story of her birth, and her mom just said, I think that's when she confirmed the story that your dad had an affair. An affair is kind of a nice word for it, because again, the girl was 16. And statutory rape laws did exist back then. I don't know what the situation was, but they had divorced, and she asked the story, and my grandma told her as much as she would, and then my mom said, "Well, who was the girl?" And my grandma said, "You want to make me live through this drama again, and live through this pain, this very painful moment in my life," which was one of her ways. She would play the martyr card quite eloquently. And after she died in 70, I remember the funeral. Mom was, sad. She also felt guilty because she felt like if grandma had come to live with us, maybe she wouldn't have died when she did. I gotta say, the rest of us are really glad that she made the decision she did. So to not let grandma move in with us. I don't know if my dad would have survived it. They were rough. There's so many stories about that relationship, and I got to just kind of leave it there. And through this time, when my grandpa served in World War II, he was a Seabee in the Navy. He was at D-Day, and I talked to my aunt recently about his experience, and she told me about, she asked him about that experience, and it was like he was reliving it. He just got emotional, and he talked about you know, it was a Saving Private Ryan moment. The water was red, you know, body parts, the whole thing. So he had these qualities that were not admirable, but I mean, he also served his country. I think people are complicated, and he was good in other ways. He was a good man in some ways. He had some serious faults. So he settled down and raised a family in Wenatchee. And we learned about this. Because I mentioned I grew up here. He moved away. He was from Oregon, and he moved up, and he settled in. He and his family settled in Wenatchee. Mom didn't know where he was. Mom didn't know anything about his family. She kind of knew he had one. And so for quite a while, she wondered who her mother was. She, you know, it was good to have half the story. She wanted to know who the biological mother was. There are health reasons, but I think there are also not just curiosity, but that, you know, if you're into spirituality, there's you know, the story is that, I mean, the people say that we carry our ancestor stories in our DNA. We inherit who they are as much as we we are who we are, and we're molded by our experiences, but also we carry some stuff with us that comes from experiences of others. And so she tried to pursue it. She was big into genealogy. Part of that interest came from, you know, we joined the Mormon Church in the 70s, and there's a big emphasis on genealogy in the church, in case you did not know that. And she took that on, and it was fascinating. And she created some, you know, some interesting. She learned a lot of interesting stuff. And she, you know, she did the genealogy for her father and her mother and my dad's parents. So around 1976, this was another moment where I knew something significant was happening. There was a letter that arrived at our house from it was a woman's handwriting. I don't mean to generalize, I don't mean to stereotype, but it was a woman's handwriting. And it was from Seattle. And for some reason, I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was something significant. It wasn't unusual to receive letters back then, but for some reason, this thing struck me as unusual. My mom opened the letter, and she learned that she had a half sister, a half brother, and another half sister in Seattle. And they arranged to meet. And when I first saw them together, there was just no doubt. It was just, you know, it was so clear that they were sisters. And that's how they carried on. And my Aunt Pauline took on the challenge that my mom was, you know, my Aunt Pauline encouraged my mom to try to find out who her birth mother was, because it would help with a story, you know, for her as well, because this was her dad's story. She, I have always been amazed at how quickly and how easily it was for Pauline to accept us as family, to just take us on. It was, I mean, I look back now and I still just marvel at that. There was no hesitation on her part. I had hesitation. She didn't. She and her husband had two adorable little girls, and they came to visit us, and we were family. I mean, all of a sudden I had another family, and it was wonderful. Like I said, I had some hesitation. It seemed a little weird at first, but then it just, I took to it, and our whole family took to it. And so, and they've been supporting us. That family came to my college graduation, and we have done everything we could to see them all these years, all this time. So it's been great. We've got, so for me, I've got 3/4 of the story. I wasn't that concerned with it until I continued to watch my mom try to find out who her mother was. And at one point, after they had left California and they moved up to Utah, she was living, she made a phone call down to this church where her parents had attended when she was born, and she had attended some afterwards. And there was a woman there who had been there was a woman who was the secretary of the church back when my mom was a kid, who was still the secretary of this church. This was like decades later. And they had this really friendly conversation until my mom asked if she could fill in the blank. And the woman went cold and hung up as quickly as possible. And we kind of speculated, maybe that's the woman. Maybe that's the mom. And the thing is, all we could do was track down stories. I love stories, and I find them fascinating, and I find them telling about ourselves. But it's what we had to rely on. And the longer you go, the more people die. And eventually, too early, my mom, 65 years old, when she learned that she had cancer, and 2 weeks later she died. And she went to her grave not knowing who her mother was. And I wrote this in 2007 as well, that, you know, being somebody who, you know, if you talk about an afterlife, by now, obviously, the whole mystery has been revealed to my mother, assuming in an afterlife, they tell you what happened. They tell you the whole story, figuring that in a place like heaven, you can understand context better than you can in a place like earth. So I took some comfort in that, but I still thought, you know, it would be nice to know. And early, it's sometime in the 2000s, I called somebody who deals with DNA, because, you know, and I told them the whole story. We know who our dad, or we know who our grandpa is. We don't know who the grandma is. And whoever this was says, well, it's actually a little harder to find out maternity than it is paternity. It's hard to find out. It's harder to find out information from the woman's side than it is from the man's. And so, you know, I'd have these little things, and I didn't know how to look at any of this stuff. And then Ancestry, DNA, and 23andMe come out. Eventually, I don't know what it was that made me think that this might help, but I decided, this was a couple of years ago, I decided to get my DNA done. And if nothing else, there you learn, you know, what your heritage is. And so they send you a little box. In case you haven't done this, let me explain the process to you. They send you a little box, you spit in a tube, you send it back. And a few weeks later, they email you, or they send you information with how to go find your information. And I open this up, and it is interesting. It doesn't answer everything, but there are people showing up as second cousins, including, I think, a guy I went to high school with who shows up as a third cousin. And I'm thinking, wow, so he must be related, you know, he must be related to my grandma somehow. And so maybe we can start putting things together. And I would go in fits and starts of looking into this stuff. And my Aunt Pauline never gave up on it. And she kept, you know, asking me questions. One of the things they did is they have you know, my mom has a birth certificate with a mom and a dad and her name on there, but they're all fake names other than hers. Well, even her last name, because you know, they gave her the last name Jackson, and that was not the family name. And so, and you know, you go on with the story. You think you know what you know, because why would they make up a story to make somebody look so awful? And so, and you know, they're protecting this woman, whoever she was. Maybe she was a secretary at that church. And I kind of, you know, I would set it aside because it just is overwhelming. I have DNA information, apparently. I have family tree information that I didn't have. I have relatives I didn't know, but none of them really, you know, they're not names that I recognize. I mean, there are some from my father's side, and there were some that I thought might be from my mother's side. And so a couple of months ago, I mentioned Amy Kent. Amy Kent reached out to me, and Amy Kent had showed up as a second cousin, and we began chatting about things. We have one person who I won't name who shows up as a first cousin. We both share that. So we're second cousins. We each have a first cousin who's the same guy. And I had asked so I have cousins on my dad's side that show up in Ancestry DNA, and I had asked them months ago whether that guy showed up in their DNA, and he didn't. So I knew, okay, so this is somebody from my mother's side. And again, and you do your typical Google searches, and you can find out some cool things. You can just Google somebody's name, and you can find an obit where somebody shows up, and so little by little, these pieces are coming together. And Amy reached out, we chatted about things, and she had some information that was helpful. But we didn't have the answers yet. Neither one of us had the answers we were looking for. And then my Aunt Pauline contacted me, my mom's sister contacted me. And she said she had watched the show with Lewis, I think his name is Lewis Gates. It's a DNA show that's on PBS. And it was somebody finding a mother or a grandmother, and she said it reminded her of us. And so she contacted me and she told me about a website. It's called discoverfamily.net. And that they help people do things. And I thought, okay. And this was last week, and it sparked me to do a little more digging, or to, at least try. I didn't really have a lot of hope. I just didn't necessarily have a lot of hope that I'd ever find out who my mom's mom was. But for her sake, because it had been important to her, I kind of felt like it was my mission too now. And so I reached out to this organization, discoverfamily.net, and they called me on Monday. And a woman named Megan and I had a long conversation about things, and she gave me some ideas as to what to do on Ancestry DNA. There's also a place where I could get my raw DNA and plug it into some other site. And I did those things, and then I asked if we could chat. This was yesterday. And when I called her, we started, so I let her have access to my site. It's as a collaborator. She can't change anything, in case you're worried. But she could go in and see some of the things that I could see. And we did not discover who my mom's mom was. What we discovered is her dad is not her dad.
Oh.
And on one level, it was so to my cousin, if my cousins are watching this, if Michelle is watching this, you cried at your wedding, so you can't give me any grief about this. But it was I said it floored me. I was so excited. And I have this strange, it's a sickness, I guess, that if there's a mystery and I get the answer, almost no matter what the answer is, I'm excited, because somehow it closes a loop, it closes a story. This is why conspiracy theories are so attractive, because they close, they give you an ending, and life just doesn't give you endings. And here I had one this was a situation where I got less. I got less, but I ended up getting more at the same time. I got more information and something got taken away. And, but it didn't. I mean, this is the good news. Family is family. And, I reached out to my Aunt Pauline and told her this, all this information. Here's the thing though, this is the reason I always trusted the story about my grandfather being my mom's dad, is why would they tell that story that makes him look so bad if it wasn't true? And I've come up with a couple of theories, and in my conversation with Megan at discoverfamily.net, there's some that are more realistic than others. One of the theories is he actually did have an affair with a 16-year-old girl who got pregnant. It just happened to not be his child. That's a possibility. What's more likely is my grandmother not being able to have children of her own, being heartbroken over this. And he might have been heartbroken about this as well. They wanted to have a child. And so this is where, so the best case scenario is this. They knew of a girl who was having a baby, and they were willing to provide a home. To do it the way they could afford it or wanted to was not legal. They could pay to have a baby, and they could doctor up a birth certificate, and perhaps that's what they did. The worst case scenario is that they stole a baby. My hunch is that somewhere in between there, that they knew somebody. My hunch is they probably knew somebody, because the first cousin that Amy and I share is born in Kansas, and my grandmother is from Kansas. She has Kansas all over her. That's all over, and I remember her conversations about Canvas. So as excited as I was yesterday, some of the repercussions, and I knew it. I was talking to Diana about this. It's like, tomorrow, I might feel a lot different about this, but I've already committed to tell this story to folks. And here's the reality. Family is family. And it's not like I'm an adopted person. It's not like that at all. I didn't grow up, you know, it isn't like I'm a kid and my parents come and say, by the way, we're not your parents. It hasn't been like that. I've always known who my parents were and never doubted it. I've got cousins to prove it now. The paternity is indisputable there. I do mourn a little bit for my mother, and part of me is glad that she didn't. I don't know. I wonder. I think part of me thinks she would have accepted knowing this, and part of me and would have chosen to be grateful perhaps for her father. Part of her might have been crushed. I don't know. Pauline was great with it. Family's family. I may have cousins watching this tonight. I love you guys. No, you know, no matter what, family is family. And I never had to question that before, and I don't question it now. So that's my story. I hope I told it brief enough so that, anyway. So thank you all for joining me. Do any of you have, I forgot to tell you, if you have questions along the way, do any of you have questions?
I think we need to think on that for.
So some other things. Yeah. I was going to try to get before I knew this, I was going to try to get my Aunt Pauline has done 23andMe, and 23andMe and Ancestry DNA, they don't share the information. So I was going to try to get the raw DNA from her stuff, and we just couldn't make it work. So I decided to go ahead and get Ancestry 23 or 23andMe. Now it's possible that in a couple of weeks I could find out I'm wrong again. Maybe we are related. It is really unlikely. The reason you know this, and this is what Megan taught me, and if any of you have questions as to how to find your family, I totally recommend you contact discoverfamily.net. I'll post a link in the page. Amazing work they do, and it is so cool to go to somebody who knows how to look and find things.
What is it again?
It's discoverfamily.net.
My mom potentially has a half sister. She actually has lost 3 of her sisters have died young, and she has maybe a half sister out there from a philandering of my grandfather, and we've been wanting to find her. So you've got me thinking about it now.
I've heard you tell the story about your grandfather and the grandmother. Didn't they move away from each other, live in separate?
Yeah.
What's that? Yeah.
From the corner from each other.
Did they actually divorce?
No, they're still legally married. My
yeah.
Showed me papers that my grandfather has written, like proposed handwritten divorce papers that she keeps to show me that he wanted to divorce her. But yeah, they just don't live together.
It's been a long time. How long has it been?
Almost 20 years.
Wow.
They've been separated. They were married for almost 50 years. They've been together their whole lives.
Wow.
One of the other pieces of good news is that we are, and thanks a lot to Amy for this, who, by the way, is commenting right now. She has found a half sister and a half brother. I don't suspect I'm going to find anybody that close, but there is, we're getting closer. We're getting closer to figuring out. So this first cousin that we share is probably my mom's half brother. So we would have to figure out whether it was his mom or dad or whatever. And this is speculation. We don't know until we know, but I know Megan's still working on it and Amy's still working on it, and I'm going to do what I can. I don't feel very smart about all this stuff, but I've been learning a lot. Again, it's discoverfamily.net. So what happens is on Ancestry DNA, you fill out a DNA, or you fill out a pedigree or a family tree, and you put in as much information as you can. And so I had put in the name of my mother and father, all the grandparents except for Leota. Again, I used her name. His name is Howard. And on my father's side, what happened was she went and looked back a few generations. And if you go to my father's side and you click on somebody, because there's a thing called through lines that fills in information that you don't know. And there's like 101 DNA matches when you go back like to the 1700s. When you go back on the other side, it's 0. I mean, it's just
Wow.
0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So it's a pretty solid evidence that that the story my mom knew was not the correct one. So it's just amazing. So I don't know. I mean, there are emotions when you figure it out, as you've seen tonight. Fortunately, you haven't seen it as bad as it could have been. But at any rate, I think it's well worth your while. Even if you don't have, here was the thing. Even if all you want to do is know your heritage, where the people come from. And what I learned was not exciting. I come from all the whitest parts of Europe. And that's it, nothing. And I was hoping for something more fun than that, and I don't know why another place would be more fun, but and I'm not gonna diss my grandparents because they didn't move away from places and live somewhere more fun, but they moved to America eventually, so I'm glad for that. Okay,
so if I could just chime in for a second, Steve. I know we're running a little long, but on the whole thing about finding yourselves in your ancestry and and even the conspiracy theory things. My dad, quite a few years ago now, found out that he had a half brother that he never knew he had from his dad, and it was interesting to meet them because we were from the ghetto, and they're from the better part of Massachusetts, so it was it was a pretty interesting find. But also familiar with the East Coast. But if you know Connecticut and you know where the sub base is in Connecticut, the Groton sub base, there's all sorts of landmarks around Groton. Avery Point's one of the big ones, and the theory is supposedly, but my family's bad at sharing information. So I had a great grandfather who actually owned the land that eventually became Groton, Connecticut, where the sub base is. And the main theory is he sold it off because he was in love with a Native American and he wanted to run off with her. So, but that's where it dead ends. Like it's kind of like the telephone game. Any family members that's traced it far enough back has had another wild story about it. So, but yeah, my name is all over Groton because my ancestors owned the land that became that city.
I think all of the DNA stuff is so absolutely amazing. Thank you for that, Steve, for sharing such a wonderful story tonight.
Yes. Yeah.
Next time, yes.
What's that?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. If I learn any more, I'll tell you. I probably won't.
Yeah, we're excited to hear about this new adventure that you and some other family members are embarking on.
Yeah, I may not be able to wait till the next story night if information comes in, but if I'm disciplined, I will. So yeah, this is well, thank you, and thank you for allowing me to go long, and not that you had a choice. I kind of set this thing up, so I guess it's really my call, but you all could have left. Anything else? Anybody have anything to add before we sign off for the night?
I just have to say, you said years ago about a story that I told that was long, that didn't feel long, and I would share that back at you. That was fascinating, and thank you for sharing it with your true emotion coming through. It was really touching. Right now, we're all missing those connections with that kind of warmth, and we all really want to hug, and I'd love to give you a hug and pat on your back a whole bunch right now, but I just have to say thank you for sharing it. It's made my day. All the stories were terrific, but thank you so much for sharing that deep story. Thanks.
Yeah, thank all of you, and and thank you for coming with stories. We could have been 20 minutes tonight, but and that would have been fine. Your stories were wonderful as always. I can't wait till we can meet in person again. I say that every month. Anybody have anything else they want to add tonight?
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve.
If not, then
Thank you.
Yes.
Good night, everyone. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. We'll see you next month. The theme is cars. I'm taking a rest there, but I know people have good car stories, and it'll probably good. October is going to be a good month for that. So until then, good night.
Thanks, be well.
Good night.